Hi everyone, it's Vanessa Gertman here from Alpas. Welcome back to the Fireplace series, where we're building our first Alpas app from scratch. In the last video, we created our repo for this project and went over the project structure. So if you haven't seen that video, I'll link it below. You should check that out too. Today, we're going to be adding auth to our application. In order to do that, we're going to have to create a database for our app, update a few configuration values, and then run the alpas auth scaffolding command. So not a ton of code we're actually going to have to write today, but we'll be adding a ton of functionality to the app. So let's get started. We are going to need a MySQL database, and in order to do this, you need to have MySQL Server installed and running on your computer. In my opinion, Homebrew is a really good way to do that if you don't already have MySQL Server installed. But I'm going to assume for the purpose of this video that you do. I like to use SQL Pro to do local database management. It's a free tool available on Mac, and I'll add a link to their website where you can download it in case you don't already have a database management tool you like. So let's go ahead and open up SQL Pro. And I'm going to connect to my root user, and this is that way I can make a database with SQL Pro instead of doing this from the command line. So I'm going to go to database, add a database, and pick a name. I'm going to go with Fireplace, but you can choose whatever you'd like to use. And that's it. I'm not going to add a special user for Fireplace just because I'm only going to be having this database local. I don't need to add any special restrictions, so we're going to leave it with that. Minimize that for right now. And now we have our database. We're going to need to tell our Fireplace app to use the database. So let's open up IntelliJ. And I've got the Fireplace project open. Let's go to our env file. And you can see in here, when we ran our alpas init command, alpas took a guess at what our database name was going to be, and it was Fireplace. And they just put in a temporary password for the DB password you have for root. So go ahead and enter whatever you have. And then the other thing we need to make sure is that the DB connection is MySQL. So that's good. So we have our configuration values that we need. Also, since we're talking about env files right now, I just wanted to bring up something that you may already know, but since it's important, I thought I'd mention it really quick. Your env file should not get checked into source control at any point in time. And there's a couple different reasons for this. First is security reasons. So maybe this file is going to contain some secret API keys that you don't want to accidentally get shared, or in our case, database password we don't want shared. So for security reasons, it's not a good idea. Secondly, different developers on your team might want to use different environment configurations, and also different servers might need different values for those configuration values as well. The starter template for Alpas adds .env to your git ignore automatically, so you shouldn't be prompted to add it to git, but just keep an eye out for that. So just kind of a sidetrack, but an important one. So now we've got our database information set up in our env file. I'm going to close this. And we need to update now our database config. So we talked about this last time. In the config folder, there's something called DatabaseConfig. And if you look right now, there's a commented out line that says add connections. And the connection that we're adding in add connections right now is MySQL, which is exactly what we want. We're using a MySQL database, we need a MySQL connection. So I'm just going to uncomment this line, and that's it. So now we're actually ready to migrate our database. Authentication needs two different tables to be in your database. users and password reset tokens. Alpas has predefined versions of these tables/entities. It also comes with a migration we need to make these tables. So we talked about in the last video as well that inside database, there's a migration folder, and this is the migration that comes pre-built with our starter template. You'll see in this migration, we're creating a table called for entity users, and then creating another table for password reset tokens. So that's what's going to happen when we run this migration. Let's go ahead and do that now so we can get the tables that we need. And the command is really simple. It's just alpas migrate. Okay, so that failed, and that's because I forgot one other thing we need to do. So let's go to the ConsoleKernel. And if you look at the ConsoleKernel, as I mentioned in the last video, these are the different providers that are going to be loaded when you're running alpas from the command line. And if you look here, this very last one that's commented out is the OzoneServiceProvider, and Ozone is the link in alpas between KTorm and alpas. So we definitely need this service provider in order to run a migration command. So I need to uncomment this. And the reason this is commented out when you initialize your app is because a lot of times we don't have our database set up the very first time you're trying to serve it. So it causes more problems to have that automatically enabled. So we're going to just go ahead and uncomment this, save it, and try and run that migration command again. And there we go. So it created the users table. It ran that migration. Let's look at our database and see. If I refresh this here, now we have a users table, password reset tokens, and we've got this extra table, migrations. So this is how Alpas keeps track of the migrations that have already been run. So we have an entry in here saying that the migration was run. There's also a rollback command, so you can undo the migration, and it's going to use this table for that. So another thing, we'll go ahead and run this alpas migrate command again, and we're expecting it to not work because everything is already migrated. So that's basically just saying it looked in our database migration folder and it's run everything that it needed to run. So we're good here. We have our user table and password reset token. So now we need to set up the rest of the auth system. And an authentication system, as you might imagine, has a lot of files and wiring that it needs in order to work. But thankfully, Alpas has an ability to create all of this for you with a simple command. So that command is alpas make auth. So let's go ahead and run that one. All right. And then Alpas is giving us this helpful message that says, hey, by the way, you need to add this auth routes to your route file. So as we talked about in the last video, when we want to add routes, we're going to go to the routes file. And this is not the right routes file. Hold on. I opened that already, so that's why it was the first one it found. I want the one not in Alpas auth. I want the one in my project source main Kotlin. So in here, in the addRoutes section, we're going to add our auth routes. And we'll go ahead and say import that and save it. So now we have all the auth routes we need, like login, things like that. And then actually if I go in here, this is that file I accidentally just opened earlier, you can see the routes that are actually getting added by calling this auth routes. So we've got login, log out, register, reset, password. All right, so now we should have everything we need. I'm just going to go ahead and close all of this. Now we're going to compile and run our app. So I'm going to build our assets as well. And then while it's doing that, pull up the start file. and we're going to run our application. It should be available. And you can see we've got 2 new buttons, login and register. And actually, we have a whole auth system now, including login, registration, password reset, and email verification. So let's go ahead and make a user. I don't have an account yet, so I'm going to register. All right, now we'll try and log in with our new account. And you'll see it said, please verify your email. We've sent an email to alpas. So how's that working? Well, by default, Alpas has 2 mail drivers, one of which is local, and the other is SMTP. So let's go check out our environment file, because that's where we would have configured that. So in .env, we look at our mail driver, local. So that's good news. So when you're using local mode, that means the emails are going to get written as HTML files and stored in your storage/mail folder. And I actually have one right here. So if we open this, you can see we have an email. So I'm going to go ahead and say confirm. Great, so now we've logged in with a verified account, and all of that was set up automatically with the auth scaffolding. If you don't want to require email verification in your application, you don't have to. It's pretty easy to disable it. I'm going to walk you through the steps of doing that now, and at the end of it, though, I'm going to uncomment that code because I want email verification turned on. All right, so first we're going to go and look at... close all this. We're going to go to our routes file. And in auth routes, we're going to pass a variable. And that variable is require email verification. And we're going to set it to false. So we don't, in our routes, we say we don't require email verification. Then we're going to go in the user class, and right here, must verify email, we're going to change that to false. Oops. And then just for some cleanup, we've got a home controller, and right now, in the middleware, you can see that it says verified only middleware, meaning that it's going to add that middleware to this controller. We're going to get rid of that. And since this is the only middleware we have on here, we can actually just go ahead and get rid of this whole line. All right, so that's how you would disable email verification, and then you wouldn't require it anymore. And that is it for auth. So today we created our database and set up authentication for Fireplace. In the next video, we're going to be adding the ability to create and display projects. Thanks so much for watching. This was Vanessa Gertman from alpas. See you next time.